Hello, and welcome to Nature Connects. Nature Connects is TNC in Massachusetts webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and our partners from New England and around the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Allison Bowden, TNC in Massachusetts Director of Conservation Science and Strategy, and your host for today. We have an exciting program for you. I'll be chatting with Jen Benson, former legislator and current president of the Alliance for Business Leadership, also known as ABL. We'll discuss how ABL helps create a network of business influencers who are collaborating to develop solutions to long-term challenges to make Massachusetts a better and more welcoming place for all. Jen will also talk about how you can make a difference with effective strategies for influencing your public officials. Before we dive into today's program, I wanted to share a little bit about our guest. Jen Benson is the president of the Alliance for Business Leadership, a coalition of progressive business leaders who believe that social responsibility and sustainable growth go hand in hand. Jen served for 11 years in the Massachusetts House of Representatives and served as the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Healthcare Financing, which considered all matters concerning the direct funding of healthcare policy and programs, including Medicaid and other public health programs. She also served as chair and vice chair of several committees, including state administration and regulatory oversight, consumer protection and professional licensure, and community development and small business. Jen received a BA in art history from Florida Atlantic University and a Master of Public Administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. As you think of questions for Jen, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Thanks again so much for joining us today. Now we'll dive into conversation with Jen.
Hi, thank you so, hello. Thank you so much, Allison. It's great to be here. And thanks to TNC, this is great. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Excellent, it's our pleasure to have you today. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got your start?
Yeah, well, first I have to give a shout out. I see my old friend Pam Reesner, Senator Pam Reesner's in the audience. She's watching, and I'm so excited. She has been a great role model for me, and I'm so excited that she's here. But you know, my start, I think, is a start like so many women who are running for office, serving in office. I was an advocate. You know, I was home with my children. I was an environmentalist. I was an advocate for stronger climate policies, and was really interested in making sure that my kids, my 3 kids, had a bright and healthy future. And so what I did was I started getting really involved in my community. I got involved in democratic politics. I started moving up the ranks in local politics. I served on my local school committee, and then I had the opportunity to run for state representative. And, you know, I'll tell you a story that I think is really important, and I tell it a lot. I thought I was asked by the person who served in my seat, in the state rep seat before I did. He called me and he said, "I think you should run for this seat." And I said, "Oh, why would I want to do that?" And I think a lot of women say that. And my daughter was sitting at the table, and she was 13 at the time, and eavesdropping on this phone conversation. And she said, you know, she said, "People like you have to be willing to do this." And so, you know, she scolded me. You know, she told me that that's how democracy works. And so so I did it. And the deal we made is if I did it, she was going to do it with me. And so she trained to be my campaign manager. We went to at 13, and she didn't stay my campaign manager, but you know, she started, but she learned how to count votes, and she learned how to message, and this became a family project. And quite frankly, I never thought I would win. And what I thought was this was a great platform to talk about these issues that I cared so much about. And you know, I got to meet Senator Reeser. I got to meet so many people who really helped me build the confidence to do this, and I won. And I couldn't believe that I won. And it just became this, you know, what started as a passion project became a career and something that I'm really, really thrilled I was able to do for so long.
What a wonderful origin story. So is your daughter in politics now?
She is. Actually, I have three children. I have two daughters and a son. Both of my daughters are in politics. And, you know, I always said when I was early running and saw so few women running at younger ages, I said, you know, if we want women running for high office, we've got to start them young and flood the gates. You know, we need to just have more and more women running. And so I guess I just, you know, bred my daughters to get in there. And so my oldest daughter actually works for Senator Warren. And my middle daughter worked on Senator Warren's Senate campaign and presidential campaign in Iowa. And now she works for a company that does voter targeting. It's a tech company. So she still has her hands in politics.
Very cool. Well, so you won not just that one time with the encouragement of your daughter, but several elections after that, if you served for 11 years. Tell us a little bit about that experience as, you know, bringing that background that you mentioned.
Yeah, you know, so where I served was not a what you would call a progressive district. It was really created in the 2000 redistricting to be a more conservative district, and it's North Central Massachusetts. It you know, is a district that has a lot of variety as far as rural and suburban and Republican and conservative and very progressive people. But the issue that really cut across everything, and I think an issue that is near and dear, obviously, to my heart, is climate. You know, if you talk to farmers, they care about climate. If you talk to parents, they care about the environment and climate. And it's something that, you know, really cut across as a concern for everyone. And so that was a good match for my passion and my district. And what I found when I got to the State House is so many people shared that. The problem was there was a lot of disagreement on how to address it. There was a lot of disagreement on what it would cost, and there was a lot of disagreement on how big a problem it was. One of the things that kind of propelled me into it very quickly on a very technical level was in 2008, when I was first elected, we had that major ice storm. And I think maybe some people on the call remember that. And my district was heavily impacted by that. And you know, Lunenburg, where I was from, had lost power for a very long period of time, and our utility provider did not respond. And there was nothing in state law that said there was a way to deal with that. You know, there was no way to come in and take over. It was their responsibility to respond. And so the first thing I did when I came into the House was asked to be put on the TUE committee. And so I was the only freshman on the TUE committee, and I sat down with the chairman and we wrote a bill. We wrote quite a large reform bill, and a piece of that bill was putting in protections for people in that situation. So if a utility provider did not respond to an emergency situation like this, we could bring in a different provider to come and take over in that situation. And, you know, seeing in the first 5 months in office, seeing that bill pass, be able to use my experience, firsthand experience, sit down, write a bill, be able to speak on the floor about why that bill was important and watch it pass, and have the governor come to my hometown and sign it was amazing. And it really showed me the power of getting people to work together and get something done. And the power of educating my colleagues on why something was really important, because they didn't see it, they didn't live it, they didn't understand the devastation that happened, but I was able to effectively communicate that to them. And it really taught me a lot about the process.
It seems like that kind of communication is really key to getting things done, but it can be hard to get the attention of legislators, where there are so many issues and so many priorities and so many lobbyists who get paid to to advocate for issues. Do you have any tips for our audience for how constituents can develop relationships with their legislators and get them to pay attention to those kinds of issues that are so important to people, like that ice storm that was such a big life impact for you and your family?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing to always remember, and it's so funny, my personal experience was, I went from being a mom in the schools, and my friends were other moms, and we would, go to school performances together. And then suddenly I was elected to office and I was something else. And people looked at me differently. So, I think the first thing to remember is we're a democracy. That means that your neighbor, your friend, your family member could be elected to office and they're still your friend, neighbor, family member. They're just another person. That's how democracy works. And so it's not, you don't want to treat them as an other. They're part of your community, right? And I think that understanding that relationship is really, really important, and not going into it. I think I've seen it, I've felt it so many times that it's an assumed adversarial relationship. And so, what I have always found, and I think addressing these issues as an opportunity for education is extremely important. Now, there's always going to be an opportunity for disagreement too, right? And your rep, your senator, whomever you're working with may not agree with you. They may not agree that this is even an issue. Of course, I had colleagues I worked with, I had constituents I worked with who did not believe in climate change, right? That's a problem. You're not going to convince them if they don't believe in science, if they don't believe in the data, right? But if you can at least start with a basis of understanding, I think there is an ability to teach, to learn, to bring in information. And sometimes that takes time. And, and just because someone doesn't get it right away doesn't mean they're not with you. It means they're not with you yet. And I think that that's a really important way of approaching these relationships. Is it's an evolution. It's you have to be willing to teach and not to assume nefarious intent, not to assume they're never going to be with you. They're just don't get it. One of the I think of some funny, or not funny, but interesting examples. So I filed a carbon pricing bill in the legislature, and it was really cutting edge, and people didn't get it. They didn't get it. What's the difference between putting a price on carbon and a gas tax? Or, why is this better than that? Or they didn't understand the whole concept of it. And it took a long time to really educate colleagues, and it's still happening, why this was a tool rather than just a revenue source, and to understand sort of the economic sort of underpinnings of this concept, right? And so it takes time. And I think people are impatient. I think we live in a time where people are so far ahead sometimes with where they're at. They're impatient when other people aren't there yet. Our government runs very slowly. It's very sticky. It's designed to be that way. We have 9,000 bills filed. You do not want 9,000 laws created every session. that would be not good, right? And so the whole system is designed against you. That is the way it's made. And so you have to be patient, and you have to educate, and you have to work as if you are in a classroom of students, and you have to make sure they're all coming along with you. And it's frustrating. You got to be patient and take the time.
That concept of building connection and being patient with people and sort of meeting people where they are really resonates with me. My town has a representative town meeting, and so I'm an elected representative on that much smaller stage and excuse me, in a different context, but many of those same principles that you just talked about definitely feel like, yeah, how do you get people to be even interested in this Warrant article that you're so passionate about? How do you connect it to something that is a priority for them? So you were in the legislature for 10 or 11 years, and now you're in this new role with ABL, a leadership role as president. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in that role, what your top priorities are, and maybe how do you bring some of those principles forward from your experience first as a mom and an advocate, and then as a legislator? How does that translate into the work that you do today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's sort of very seamless in my mind. I mean, it's all related. And one of the things, when I had the opportunity to move over to ABL, I really saw it as an extension of the work I was already doing. It was I wouldn't have done it if I didn't get to continue to sort of work on my life's passion. I hit a point in the legislature where I was getting things done. I was effective. I was in leadership, and I was in good stead with leadership with my colleagues. I enjoyed my colleagues, and they were doing the right thing. They were trying to do the right thing. But what I kept hearing was the pressure from the outside, and you see this, you watch this on the news, you hear this out of DC too, right? It's this constant 24-hour social media, everyone has an opinion, pressure from the outside saying, don't do this, don't do that, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost that. What I kept hearing especially for climate legislation, but for other things too, the business community doesn't like it. It's going to cost too much. Oh, we can't pass this. We have to water it down because it's going to cost too much. The business community won't like it. As if the business community is this monolith that all thinks the same way, that is, just going to bulldoze everything. And my feeling was, if I'm hitting a roadblock on the inside, maybe I can change it from the outside. And so ABL was this great vehicle for addressing that problem, because ABL is this group of progressive business leaders who are very successful in their own right. They are, active in not only their sphere of business, but they're active in their community, in their civic realm, right? And it's an opportunity to say, hold on, the business community does not all think this. We actually think we should go further. And so I have this opportunity to say, I have, over 100 business leaders who are saying you're wrong. They're saying not only should we be, net zero by 2050, we should be accelerating that. Not only should we be investing in this, we should be looking at our, $1 billion investment in life sciences that we did in 2008 and doing as much in renewable energy investment and innovation here in Massachusetts. That we should be looking at this not only as a moral issue and as a generational issue for our children. This is a innovation and economic issue for Massachusetts. You know, this is an important business innovation and investment for Massachusetts. So we're trying to, and I think effectively, change that narrative that this is good business sense. It's good for the environment, it's good for our future, but it's also good for business. And, you know, we need to be telling that story more effectively. And that's what ABL really excites me. And that's what brought me to the table.
Can you talk a little bit more about maybe how you or some of your members engage with with climate impacts? Like, what are the business risks, or how are your members thinking about how climate affects them, that drives them to be interested in these bold solutions?
So it's interesting. So, you know, one of the things that I did when I came into ABL, actually, today is my 2-year anniversary at ABL. Thank you. One of the things that I did was really create some structure around the policy work and learning that I wanted to do with our business leaders. And so we created several councils around different areas of policy. And our most popular one is our Climate and Energy Policy Council. And we have people in the field and others who are interested in learning more. And so we talk about sort of these impacts. So for example, when the next generation climate bill came up, you know, we talked about what does that mean for your business? So what we try to do is not only talk about the impacts for the environment overall, the impacts for Massachusetts in general, but we start talking about what are the impacts for your industry. So on this council, we have folks who are in the hotel industry, in the trucking industry, in affordable housing industry. So what does this mean for you? And we try to break it down. And when we can start getting people who are, you know, in the trucking industry and people who build affordable housing to come together and write an op-ed about why this is important to do, that's pretty powerful, right? It's not just the people who are working in offshore wind. It's actually the people who are the consumers of the energy, the people who are actually building infrastructure that are going to have to be looking at those increases in energy, infrastructure, conservation, all of those pieces that so many people come out and say, wait a minute, this is going to make housing more expensive in Massachusetts. You know, we're bringing them to the table and really digging into those issues. And so we get pretty granular as we talk about these policies. Another great example that I'm excited about is we're bringing a group of 25 business leaders to Denmark and in June to study offshore wind in their transition and what that meant for a lot of their industries. And we have a cross section, people from healthcare, high tech, architects, developers, to really try to dig into exactly that. How did this impact their industry, your industry, hospitality? What can you bring back to Massachusetts as a learning and as a teaching for others? So we're really trying to be hands-on in giving, not just pontificate or evangelize about why these things are important, but really give hands-on examples directly to our business leaders as to how it impacts their industry and how they can be influencers within their industry on why this is important and how it'll work.
Is that kind of delegation approach, like information exchange, a key part of your overall approach to advocating for renewables?
Well, this is a very, I mean, obviously we don't go to Denmark every day. This is a very, very unique opportunity funded by the Barr Foundation, which we're very grateful for. But it's this really deep hands-on understanding that is something that we value. And I think it is very unique. I mean, we're the only statewide progressive business organization that is really focused on understanding policy at this level. We don't leave it only to sort of the policy subcommittee to sort of say yay or nay on a piece of legislation. We're really trying to be thought leaders. We're trying to be proactive thought leaders on, you know, yes, we should be pushing the envelope on investing in, you know, storage, innovation here in Massachusetts. We should be sending more money to Mass CEC so that they can be investing in the future of energy here in Massachusetts. And that creates its own gravity for startup businesses coming in. We've seen it before. We've done it here. We're an innovation economy. We can do this here in Massachusetts. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on.
So you mentioned, I mean, your trip to Denmark is kind of focused around offshore wind. How important do you feel like offshore wind is for our net zero goals?
I think it's really important. So ABL is a founding member of the New England for Offshore Wind Coalition. So, you know, we're working both within Massachusetts, but within our region to see, are there ways that we can sort of pool resources in this area? We know we have a great sort of geological structure here in New England to take advantage of this. We work with our friends in wildlife protection areas to make sure that we are cautious about protecting not only the environment, but our animal environment as well. We're working with labor to make sure that labor standards are safe, are protected. And so our goal is to create an industry, because we have an opportunity to create an industry kind of at the ground level, to create an industry that is forward thinking, fair, safe, and does not create future problems the way we've seen with so many other energy infrastructure of the past. And of course, it's, you know, I will say it's a piece of the puzzle. Offshore wind is not going to be everything. We have to be looking at that as a big piece, but a piece of an overall energy portfolio that includes innovations in storage and future innovations that perhaps we haven't even thought of yet. But it is a big piece and an opportunity for Massachusetts.
So just to remind our audience, in just a few minutes, we'll be transitioning over to your questions from my questions. So whatever's on your mind, go ahead and enter it into that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So we'll just keep rolling a little bit while you all keep adding on your questions. So in addition to energy, I know that you've also done some recent work on clean transportation. Recently published a letter in the Boston Globe commending Boston Mayor Wu's vote for fair, free public transportation. Can you talk a little bit about why that is an important issue for ABL and how fair, free transportation, which for some reason is a tongue twister for me. So I won't ask you to repeat that, but why is that important?
Well, first of all, you know, especially during the pandemic, as we saw people, you know, not riding the T and choosing to be in cars again, we needed to do more to get people out of cars and back on transit. So number one, That was a clear need and something that ABL was very much behind, because we were going backwards. Not only is it a congestion issue, but as you know, that is a huge fossil fuel issue. And so we needed to get people back on transit. So that's number one. So having that easy on, easy off, especially with buses, that we could be more efficient, get people moving quicker by not having to worry about fares, is one of the ways to help alleviate some of that pressure. So that's one. Two, we have a real problem, especially in certain parts of the city and in certain parts of the state, with transit equity and transit access. And what we have seen over the years, and especially the last several years, is funding a public good like a transit system on ever increasing fares. And we're pricing people out of being able to afford getting to work. And so we have to be more cognizant of the fact that these systems are a public good. If you look around the world, these public transit systems are heavily used and very low cost as compared to what we're seeing here. So if we want to really get people out of cars, we need to get them in transit. We need to make it affordable. So is fare free realistic for every part of the transit system? No, we don't have the overall revenue to pay for that. But I think in targeted places, as pilot projects, to see how does that, let's gather the data and see how does that change commuter behavior? How can we use that as a way to inform decisions about routes, fare increases or prices? Should we be targeting lower fares in certain areas? I think these are all good questions that we need to be answering. And right now, while we're still in a pandemic, let's help people as much as we can. And so, you know, I really am happy that Mayor Wu is prepared to think outside the box. You know, she's trying to get the city moving safely, efficiently, in a time when, quite frankly, it's been very hard to keep buses on the road, to find drivers to drive buses. We need to do as much as we can to keep our transit system running.
Great. Those all are really important points. As someone who took the T every day until our office is closed, and I've been here in my kitchen for the last 2 years and not adding any revenue to the T myself. So really critical issues as we think about how we go forward from here and into the future. So last question from me before we transition to our audience questions is just tell us a little bit about how our audience can learn more about ABL and support the really important work that you've told us about today.
Yeah, well, you know, we're an interesting organization. So alliancebl.org is our website, and I encourage you to come take a look. We are a coalition of progressive business people, and we encourage members to come in and be part of this work. And we not only have these policy councils where we talk about climate, housing, transportation, all of this work is done through a lens of equity, which is why things like fare-free transit is something that we talk about at length, environmental justice, affordable housing. But we also have a lot of our friends and speakers come in and try to have timely conversations. For example, we had Senator Markey come and speak to us right when the Green New Deal was hotly being debated. He was on the floor of the Senate and ran out and came and talked to us to tell us what we could do to be supporting him. we make sure that we try to have timely information for everyone. And anyone who's interested in getting involved, we will find a way to get you involved, whether that is in the local community or the greater community. So that's membership. But we're looking for sponsors to sponsor some of these programs that we put on. Our Climate Council needs sponsors. We put a lot of effort into bringing in speakers, having experiences for our members to learn about these issues. And so I would say if anyone on this call is interested in the work that we're doing, get in touch with me. We would love to have some support in sponsorship of this work.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much
you.
for answering my questions. Now let's dive into the audience questions. And as a reminder, as you think of questions, go ahead and put them in that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And we'll give Senator Reeser first question. Do Mayor Wu and Governor Baker interact with ABL?
Yes, Senator Reeser. Yes, they do. Yes, we've been talking with the Mayor Wu quite a bit and her administration, as well as Governor Baker. So Secretary Theoharides has come in, as well as several of the folks in her secretariat. So they have been really excellent allies and listeners to some of the things that we have recommended for them. So, we're willing to work with anyone, and we really believe in having conversations that are honest, open, and productive. So yes, so we interact with both, with all.
Excellent. So this question is from John Aram. What strategies do you employ at ABL for bringing companies that are lagging on commitment to social and public issues into the fold of more progressive leadership?
So our theory of change is that we are at the vanguard of progressive thought and progressive public policy. And so, I try not to shame, but what I do is try to model. And so we will put out op-eds, and I'm sure you've seen some, and letters to the editor, and speak at events where we sort of set the stage and kind of plant the flag to say, this is where the business community should be. And we've been pretty successful in bringing some of our more conservative colleagues up behind us. And what we try to do is not only plant the flag, but plant the seed of knowledge, data, and information to show why it's the right thing to do. And again, I'll use that carbon pricing example. When we first started talking about that, ABL endorsed that idea, and then it started percolating around some of the other more conservative business organizations. And I think that what we've been able to do is, when we take the heat being out front, it allows them to come up behind, and it seems less scary for them. So that's one of the things we've been able to do. And so I'm pretty happy to kind of be at that vanguard and take the heat for them. The theory for ABL is, we hear a lot about corporate social responsibility, and I think that that's a real catchphrase for a lot of companies now. What ABL does is says, great, you're doing that internally. Let's take that and do it externally. Apply that to your community. And so our goal is to bring corporations into ABL and help them really spread that work externally into the civic and community sphere. And so we're hoping we'll bring the others along with us.
There's an important, perhaps clarifying question here from Samantha Polaro. Is ABL a nonprofit?
Yes, we are a 501c3. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Good question to clarify. So there's a question from Leslie Pond. Thank you so much for this great conversation. How does ABL engage with the state legislature and municipalities? There's a couple parts here, so I'll read them all. Is ABL involved in efforts to divest from fossil fuels? what are key changes that you would like to see so the legislature can be more effective overall in tackling climate change? Did you get all those?
Yeah, got it.
Pick the parts you like.
Yeah, no, all of it. I like all of it. No, so how do we engage with the state legislature? So, I think I talked a little bit about that. I have, and my members have testified before the legislature, of course, sent letters. We have participated and gone days on the Hill to talk to legislators about issues with partners and other advocacy organizations. But, I think one of the things that I really believe in is being thought partners. And so I'm a big believer in getting in before everyone's looking for endorsement on a piece of legislation, to say, let's talk about what should be in legislation, and let's talk about sort of the parameters of legislation. And so it's not really about necessarily writing legislation, but really talking about how far can we go. And that's where I think ABL is really pushing to be on the forefront of, we can be doing better. And sometimes legislation can be really thoughtful and really strong, but we know what the legislative process is like. Believe me, I know better than most people what that process is like. Let's set the stage for something bigger. And I want honestly, and it sounds kind of corny, but I want some visionary leadership. And sometimes when you get bogged down into the details of legislation, you lose that. And so my hope is that, if the business community can get together and say, we have a vision for a fossil-free future for Massachusetts, I think that would be pretty powerful, and develop a roadmap to get there. So that's my goal. That's what I want. And I know it sounds pretty crazy, but I think we can do it.
I agree. I think so too. I mean, I love that idea of a vision. That makes me think of a question. I noticed that your undergraduate degree is in art history. Mm-hmm. And in another webinar in this series that I hosted, we did one that was focused on the arts and conservation, and how we can use art as a communication and medium to engage people. I wonder if you have any particular reflections on how your own background in the arts maybe influences your thinking, or how art can contribute to that vision.
I love that you asked me that, because nobody asked me about that. Because I have my undergraduate degree is in art. I have a minor in photography, so I do have a studio art background as well. And I think it makes me very odd. When I came into the legislature, I had a very different background, and I think I approach issues in a very different way than many of my colleagues do. And I think the way I think is really more about big picture, and then figuring out how do you get there. And I think that can be really, really powerful. And I'm a visual thinker. I think that it's really important to tell a story to help people understand what is possible and how do we create the possible. And it's, I think inspiration is really important. When people are bogged down in a crisis or a problem, they lose hope and they lose creativity. And when you're going through, say, I was a committee chair, and you're looking at a piece of legislation and you're bogged down in the details, right? People lose that sense of creativity. They lose the ability to say, wait a minute, what if we did this? I know it sounds crazy, but, and it can be a really, really powerful tool to step back and turn something completely around. And I think as somebody with an art background, you're trained to do exactly that. You're trained to say, you know, why is this way, rather than continuing on that path. And I think more people need to think that way. I think a liberal arts training is a really powerful thing.
Excellent. Very cool. So this question from David Jang, I think, has kind of a nice nexus with that reflection, and also your engagement of your daughter in your campaign. He asks, how can young people get involved and contribute to ABL's mission?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And actually, this is something that maybe you all can help me with too. So we do take interns. We're a very small shop, so sometimes having a lot of interns is really difficult. In fact, right now we're a single person shop. I'm ABL right now. I'm hiring, so it's a bit of a scramble. But one of the things I'm working on is developing a program to look at the intersection for undergraduates, to look at the intersection of sustainability, business sustainability, and government and politics, and how we can really be looking at this partnership in a more effective way to move policies forward. What I have found coming out of the legislature, which is very alarming to me, is a lot of people, a lot of really successful, smart business people do not understand government at all. They don't understand how government works. They don't understand sort of the legislative process. And it really reduces their effectiveness, I think, in being involved in getting things done. And I think that's too bad. I think we have all of this talent. We have all of these people who are so incredibly successful. And so to marry this knowledge, in my mind, would be extremely powerful. And so to start, working your way into business schools and making sure that this sort of cross-contamination happens, I think could be really, really important. So this is something that is sort of a passion project of mine. So if anybody's interested in working on that, let me know.
Excellent. That's really great. So going specifically to the legislature, Gary Martin asks, which bills in the current session do you think are the most important to pass?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, we're running out of time. So I hope you all know that the deadline for bills to get out of committee is, I think, the first week of February. So we don't have a lot of time. So I think, obviously, the bill that was just released out of the TUE committee on offshore wind is extremely important. I think that is something that needs to get passed, as well as the governor's legislation that is really capitalizing Mass CEC, among other many investments. I think that is also critically important for investing in climate and renewable energy here in Massachusetts. Right now, I think, in this realm, those are very important pieces. The interesting thing is the offshore wind legislation that Jeff Roy has released from the TUE committee, is the speaker's real priority, incorporates many other pieces of legislation pulled out of the Environment Committee and others. So it's a real omnibus piece, and I encourage everyone to learn and read about it. I'm still digging through it, but it has a lot of promise, and I think it's something that we should all be working on.
Excellent. Samantha Polaro asks a very specific question about leaf blowers. Do you think educating about the negative effects of leaf blowers would be a better tool than legislation to minimize or eliminate their use? So is there currently legislation about leaf blowers?
I have no idea.
Okay, I don't know either, but I think the broader question, I think, even if neither of us knows about leaf blowers, is education versus legislation, and maybe like the balance there. Do we teach people about why doing something a certain way is good or bad, or do we require it? What's the...
So something like leaf blowers, I will equate that to, I'm thinking back to a big fight we had in the House and Senate on ATVs many years ago. I know they're different, very different things, but if you think about them as homeowner devices that are loud and potentially dangerous, and kind of that category. It's a huge fight. It's a huge fight. People love their yard gardening, whatever devices. And usually something like that would start at the community level. And so, regulating leaf blowers typically would be a local ordinance. I don't know if that's something the legislature would generally take up, because then you're talking about, it wouldn't just be leaf blowers, it would be lawn mowers, it would be any kind of motorized lawn and yard care devices. I think that would be in that category, because they would have to define it in a certain way. So I think that would be a tricky one. So I am reticent to make a recommendation, but I would say that it is, you have to be careful, because when you write legislation, you have to have a good definition in place. Otherwise, it can lead to very unintended consequences.
We had I live in Holbrook, town meeting rep in Holbrook, and we had a noise ordinance that was put forward by the Board of Health to deal with an issue that's a major problem for some people in town. And it was defeated because enough people rose and said it might impact their ability to do things with implements in their yards. So even though I would say that was handled in the language, it was a really big priority for enough people that we weren't able to address this other issue. So that messaging absolutely resonates with me.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, that's very specific, so I can't answer that. But I don't remember having a leaf blower legislation when I was in the legislature. So
I think that you covered the principle nicely. So, and we're almost out of time. So do you have any parting thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Well, I would say that, I have a lot of hope for the future. I really do. But my concern is we're running out of time. And, as I already said, the legislative process is extraordinarily slow. And the effects of climate change are not slowing down for us to take our time to address it. And all of us kind of working on this and pulling together, I think is going to be very important. But Massachusetts in general is doing well. We have so many other states and countries that need to do the same. And I think getting things, big organizations like businesses, large scale business community efforts, bigger organizations moving together, I think is really, really critical, because we need to get this going. And I really appreciate the work that you all do, that so many advocacy organizations are doing. I really hope that we can all decide to put the investments in to make this happen, because I am worried. I am worried about the impacts we're seeing already, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to address it. We're smart. We should be able to do it. And we have the money. We have the money. We just have to spend it in the right place.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you'll come back for another conversation in the future.
Sure,
And-
anytime. Thanks.
And our pleasure. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for your support of the Nature Conservancy. Your support is what makes our work possible. We'll be sending everyone a follow-up email over the coming days with links to the resources we talked about and a recording of this webinar. If you're enjoying our webinars, please share them with your friends. You can also follow us on social media at conserve_MA on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with our work and get updates on upcoming virtual opportunities to connect with us. You can also find me on Twitter at Allison_Bowden. And I know that you can find Jen and ABL there on Twitter as well. As always, you can see our upcoming webinars and sign up at nature.org/MA webinars. Join us next Thursday for a conversation about offshore wind policy with Massachusetts State Representative Jeffrey Roy. Thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful afternoon.